I didn't get a chance to ask you, did you go on the field before the
No.
game started?
They wouldn't let us.
Oh, it was ridiculous. Ridiculous. I had to beg. Literally, like, beg.
I got there. So you got down to like the regular area or like the concourse area on the field level.
Oh yeah.
And then there's a guy at the door that would have led to. It's the door that like led to the visitors.
The light skinned guy or the black guy with the bald guy with the glasses.
The first guy.
Yeah, the mean one.
But he goes, let me see your credential. And I showed it to him. He goes, okay, come on through. And no joke, I got like 40 feet down the concourse and got, hey, you, buddy. And he's like, you can't be down here. So I think if I would have walked more quickly, I might have gotten down there. But
you look like a tourist?
Yeah. It was like, this guy obviously should not be anywhere near this area. So yeah, I that's as close as I got. And even after the game, they weren't letting people out there.
Nope.
Like it was like you could not go anywhere near there. And there were a couple other rules for like post game interviews that I thought were very. I don't know why, but apparently the club there prefers that if people are interviewed in the concourse, that a brick wall be on, like they be standing against a brick wall. Like that was very clear to us.
I listened to the BC radio team literally cuss that stadium staff out. If you've ever heard a Bostonian and a New Yorker just go back and forth, I mean, the dump button would have broken. And the walk-off, though, was the BC guy was like, hey, let's not blankety-blank effing act like this is Fenway. This isn't effing Fenway. You make it seem like this is Fort Knox.
Yeah.
I was in tears, Bruntz. I was like, oh, my gosh.
It was. I think it's fair to say that security was tight for that game.
Yeah.
On Saturday.
And
it was very tight.
And thank goodness we have Jessica, because they probably like, well, who are these two other ugly guys? And then they see her and she's like, it's 7 o'clock in that stadium, Bruntz.
I know. Well,
no, it's 6:20 because the bus left at 6, and it's dark, and there's a guy there. And listen, we're scared to death because the whole credential thing was a debacle, and so she has the stone. She asked this guy, she's like, hey, do you know how to get to the press box? And he's like, here, I'll open it up for you. And he used his scan card. And listen, it was fortuitous that we even found the guy. Right. And I looked at Benny Mack and he looked at me and he goes, there's no way we're getting that done. And he looked at, and he's super funny. He's like, especially you, DB. I was like, what do you mean? Because I'm under 6 foot? What? Yeah, it was. So I was going to say about the field, I was shocked. I was captivated by the diligence that they were using to clean it. And I was like, wow, they're very protective. But then when I went out there to do the pregame hit, it was a disaster. I couldn't believe how well the field held up given the conditions.
Yeah, no, it was. There was high potential for that thing to be like a grass horse track by halftime, and I can't imagine that the grounds crew there loved having to work in those conditions. Basically, have 300-pound guys running around and sopping wet grass in cleats for 3.5 hours.
Yeah, they didn't even want Nebraska to wheel out the equipment. They did it.
Oh, did they?
Oh, yeah. And Jay Terry is not to be messed with either, so that was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, they got it done. And I have to say that it was fun. It was even the open air thing, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I was not cold during the game, and so that was fine. But I don't know. I feel like Nebraska's done that now, and we can maybe not do that again for a while.
not trying to return to the Pinstripe Bowl again, Bruntz?
A couple of years off would be okay, I think.
And the committee was fantastic. Like
They were.
they were like the Pinstripe. They were great. It's just the folks around the stadium, man. It's just totally beneath them to do a college event.
Did you get any bowl swag, DB? Like for like a media thing? Did you get anything?
No. Well, yes. I don't know if it was considered because I was media. I don't know. Maybe just like a hanger honor.
What'd you get?
Oh, it's a quarter zip, but it actually says Pinstripe Bowl, so there's not a chance that's going to be one.
So
It's a big one on the left shoulder too.
They didn't give you the full Yankees jersey with the number on the back, but they're just like, hey, we got some quarter zips for you.
Yeah,
there you go.
I wanted
number 21.
I would have sold that Yankees jersey to the highest $4 bidder. I would not wear anything pinstripe. And they were so the guy that ended up being cool to let us in. Actually, he let Jess in. Like I was joking with him. I said, "There's only one real team." I said, "This Manhattan stuff sucks. It's like this is Brooklyn, and that team's now in L.A." I said, "Are you guys cool with that?" He looked at me like he just as soon rather have thrown me over the balcony than joke with that. But it's 6:30, man. What else are you going to joke about other than having to be there so early? It's Brooklyn.
I like that they had Randy Levine up front before the game talking about the bowl. I was like half expecting like a couple fastball questions from somebody about Major League free agency or something. I was a little disappointed that it didn't happen. But
how about that lifetime contract for the guy that moved down the street? You guys cool with that? I was childish
to get into City Field over there.
I did run down because there were a lot of Nebraska fans along what I now call Mookie Betts' wall. So I was very childish.
Why you gotta be like that?
I went down there and touched that thing. It's like, oh, that's where you guys harass Mookie. So Bruntz, you're looking at how this game was played. It was interesting to see how Nebraska's game plan, their philosophy changed. I think it changed once they figured out how that field was actually going to play. It turned into a kind of a grudgy intermediate mesh concept passing game with big kids, right?
Yeah. It was. After a couple deep shots, it was pretty clear that the footing was not great. And they adapted to their credit. Found some things that worked. I think, but there was the kind of like comeback route that Banks ran, where it felt like the ball was in the air for about 30 seconons.
About as long as it took him to get out of that break, right? Yes. It was just very touchy.
Like slow motion.
Yeah. I mean, it was, I thought Nebraska adapted. I was wondering, I haven't kind of thought through this a ton, but even like going for that fourth down, that felt new to me. Like the aggression, obviously the special teams issues being what they are probably push that, but there didn't seem to be much hesitation there that they were going to go for that. I like the routes to the backs and, kind of making BC's guys cover, in traffic and with the field conditions and everything else. I thought it was pretty smart. So, those routes seemed to be missing for a lot of the year, and it felt like you had guys that could probably run those pretty well. So it was good to see those in there. But I don't know. I mean, as tense as it kind of got late, I mean, it didn't really feel like Nebraska was ever really in any kind of danger for, 3 quarters of not being in control of that game. So, I thought for the most part, Nebraska played pretty well, all things considered. I mean, I just don't know, going forward with opt-outs and guys hitting the portal and everything else, it just feels like a lot of those bowl games are just going to be absolute crapshoots for how teams come into it mentally and, what they're able to actually get done on the field just because you have so many moving pieces.
Yeah, I was watching. I text a couple of my buddies that always want my opinion on things, and I always tell them tread lightly when it's Nebraska, but about 30 minutes after being on the field with both teams, I text a couple guys. I was like, Nebraska by 1,000. And for a while, I was like, see, man, these guys ought to do something nice for me. And then I was like, oh, gosh.
When it's 20-2?
And then I have to start standing up to do the broadcast. I'm like, are they really going to do this? Are they really going to do this? ridiculous. Like and because to your point, Bruntz, why it got dicey for a second and you probably still felt good is because Boston College at no point looked like they could control the line of scrimmage.
No, well,
that part surprised me a little bit because I liked BC up front on film.
Yeah, even the big gainers that they got were like throws that they were like kind of tip your cap throws that like they were completing. And then they had the big screen where Nebraska basically, had 6 guys that could have brought the guy down and didn't. So yeah, I didn't ever feel like Boston College was gonna just start driving it on Nebraska. Like it was gonna be one of those, like if they were gonna do anything offensively, it was gonna be like we're gonna hit a couple passes that, you're likely gonna complete like 2 out of 10 times, or a guy's just gonna miss an interception or a tip or something like that. There were 3 or 4 plays in that game where like a guy's just right there to tip a ball, intercept it, whatever, and just didn't do it. So the offensive success that they had, it felt a little bit flukier than anything. So, which can kind of be scary whenever you have the momentum kind of shift the way it did at the end. But I think I don't know what 3.5 quarters of that game felt like it was pretty just calm.
Yeah, you were like, as long as Nebraska didn't have a DB slip or miss, their tackling out of the secondary was not great. But as long as that didn't happen, it was like, well, how's BC going to score?
Yeah, but at this, that same thread though, like when you get stuff blocked and you have the special teams gaps and everything else, like you're kind of almost expecting somebody to slip at that point, right? Like you're kind of inviting that possibility creeping into the back of your mind a little bit.
We're talking with Michael Bruntz, Husker 24/7. Bruntz, when you're looking at the first opportunity we had to see a John Butler defense as defensive coordinator, do you feel like you learned anything from that, or because you feel like the personnel is going to be so different next year, you don't think you can take too much away from it?
Well, I think you can take away, it's noteworthy the way he adapted to the fact that you had so much personnel change. You had a freshman in there that played 50-some snaps at corner. That was pretty cool.
He's going to be he likes pressure. That was evident.
Yeah, no, I think. Well, he had some comment. I forget if it was during the bowl press conferences or when it was, but it was kind of about his level of aggression and kind of how he's going to call things. And he wasn't playing bend don't break. He was going to force the issue, and I think it's a matter of kind of finding guys that can put their hand in the ground and go get the quarterback themselves. I think they'll have some guys that can do that on the roster next year, but no, I thought defense. I was more intrigued by kind of what the defense was going to be in that game because of, you had young guys in really big roles. The defensive line was going to look completely different aside from Ty and Nash, and I thought he held everything together pretty well. Like if you knew nothing and said like, okay, there's somebody completely different calling this defense. There were things here and there that were different that you kind of noticed, but it didn't really feel all that different to me.
Bruntz, out of some of the guys that you mentioned, Donovan Jones playing 50-plus snaps at corner. Obviously, we saw and knew sort of what Vincent Shavers and Riley Van Poppel can do. Was there a guy that we hadn't seen a ton of this year that stood out to you as being particularly impressive?
There were a few flash plays I thought from Keona Davis in that game. I think you can see why he was a guy that they're really high on towards the end of the season, that they wanted to get back out of the portal. I know there was probably a little less drama there than what there seemed to be from the outside, but I think he's got a really bright future. I'm trying to think who else. You saw when you look up and Jordan Ochoa's in the game, as a walk on. That Nebraska was able to get some things done with some guys that had not been relied upon at all this season, and I think that's pretty impressive. I don't know, and I think I know you mentioned Shavers, and I think he's kind of been a known commodity, but you talk to him, I mean, and you can see where there's a jump to be made next year, like another level that he can go to. I mean, he's a confident kid. He's got a little bit of swagger to him, and you know he can back it up on the field too. I mean, I'm very curious to see how he looks in the middle of that defense next year, but also, you know, how does that attitude kind of, you know, go with the rest of the defense? I mean, is that going to be a group that's going to play with a little bit of swagger? Because I think they had that at times this year, but I mean, when you've got a guy in the middle of that defense that's not afraid to talk a little bit.
You got 4 or 5 of those young guys that are all kind of like that too, that play with a tremendous amount of confidence just because of their high school success too. Like I that's a sneaky good point, Bruntz, because you're spot on that those guys play with like a winning attitude. Yeah.
I mean, you're 13 games into it, but by the time you get to New York, but I mean, it didn't seem like guys were playing scared. And I think that's a good sign going into next season when a lot of those guys are going to have, you know, pretty big roles. Because I don't know. I mean, from the recruiting class this year, I mean, I don't know that there's a ton of just plug and play guys right now. In that
I agree.
And so it's going to be a lot of that 24 class that's going to have to, you know, really kind of step up and be counted on.
It actually forced me to revisit how I felt about Pro Football Focus grades too, Bruntz, which, you know, I don't love, but I was like, well, do I want to be objective or do I not? Nah, let's not be objective in this one. It's a great grade. Bruntz, let me ask.
You only use that for things you can count. That's the only thing. That's the only thing I can do.
God bless you, Bruntz. Michael Allen. So the way that Nebraska's used the portal, and I was telling Ravi, Bruntz, it was so stressful for some of the staff that weren't doing anything with bowl preparation, even though they should be. They were working the portal, right? And you see what Nebraska's been able to do so far. Do you feel better or worse as this thing's kind of winding down? And they got a couple more guys that are still on the hook, but with how Nebraska utilized the portal versus what kind of program they want to be?
Yeah, I feel okay about it. I feel a lot better if you get a tackle or two.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of maybe a linebacker. That would be the other one. But yeah, I mean, I think, you know, it's one thing when you kind of have coaches coming in and there's guys that are maybe inclined to be coached by those guys at a new destination. I think that helps you. I mean, when you can add production like that, like Nebraska did at the wide receiver spot, that's huge. Yeah, I mean, it's tough because for Nebraska this year, tackle's a big one, offensive tackle's a big need, but it just felt like it was like, okay, we need a guy or two at this spot, a guy or two at this spot. Like it was kind of more just across the board with adding a little bit of production to bridge things. And I think they did a pretty good job of it to this point. I mean, you know, I think adding the backup quarterback, another quarterback to that group was really important. And you know, I don't know that people understand just like how much work is on those staffers over there. Like you had 2,700 transfers in the portal in this little window. Mm-hmm. And like to have to go through those guys and watch film and like figure out if the guy's a fit, and you're basically doing like 72-hour recruitment at that point. Like calling it speed dating probably isn't even fair. That's tough to do. And I think they went in with kind of what they needed to target, and I think they were able to hit on a pretty high level for those needs.
That's Michael Bruntz, Husker 24/7. Bruntz, we appreciate it. As always, we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Bruntsy.
All right, see you guys. Yep.